Hey everybody, welcome back. RedmondGAMER here. Today we're going to be talking about Xbox 360 cover variations. Now, what was very interesting about the Xbox 360 was how much the system rebranded its content and the whole packaging over its lifespan. It for a modern system that was currently being released in competition with the Sony PlayStation 3, the Nintendo Wii. It was very strange to see so much revision happening for the system. And so this is also somewhat of an undocumented part of its history, which I think is surprising. So I wanted to spend some time talking about it. I see a lot and deal a lot with variations for various systems with regards to the work that I do over at GameSy.com and the video game search engine and stuff. So it was relevant to me, but it just also seemed like a pretty interesting topic. So without further ado, let's take a look at some of the variations that exist and kind of go from there. So first off, these are my own terms, but I think they summarize it fairly well. So feel free to take it and use it in your own talks about it as well. But this is version 1, and I call it the OG Dirty, Original Gangster. This is like the very first version of the Xbox 360 labeling, and the reason I refer to it as the dirty label is it should be pretty obvious. It's that gray gradient that is prevalent right here and along the spine. And you can see here over in the covers, it looks dirty. There's no other way to put it. It just looks dirty. And I don't know whose decision it was to put this out as kind of like an official release. Maybe it was rushed, or maybe it was just something that was just it looked good on the computer screen or in the models, but when they printed it out, they just ran with it. And it wasn't like this was a small batch. There were at least 100 plus titles that featured this gray gradient. So many of the early release titles have this, but that's how you can kind of tell if this is one of the kind of the first batch or the first run games that came out for the system. So that's this again, OG Dirty. But they did pick up on this, and maybe they got some feedback or just realized that hey, that looks hideous. So they fixed it. And so as you can see here, they cleaned it up. And so this is what I call the OG Clean. So the OG Clean label got rid of the gradient and started just kind of polishing it up a little bit. Looks much nicer. And I think this, to many of us, is what we kind of like remember when we think about the old Xbox 360 labeling. This is kind of what we see in our head. Another interesting thing is that they rebranded the Xbox Live here as well. So this was about this time in Microsoft and Xbox's life cycle. They started playing around with some of the rebranding. So I think that's maybe indicative of what was going on within Microsoft. Xbox was becoming its own branch and division within Microsoft. Now it's like Xbox Studios, and it's off to the races. But back then it was still part of like Microsoft Gaming Studios, and like there was a lot of branching and reorganization that was going on within Microsoft. So there was probably a lot of that happening in parallel that most people weren't like privy to like in the public scene, but that was just what was going on. So talked to many of my friends who worked over at Microsoft, and that was the way it was. So this led to the new Xbox 360, and honestly, I think this was probably the way it should have started out. This was a very clean, very crisp, very iconic look for the Xbox 360, and to me, honestly, this is Xbox 360 branding. Like this is how I remember it. This is how I see it. If you were to show me this blind, I would tell you this is Xbox 360, and that's this is where they should have started at. But it took them 3 versions to get to this point, and I call this the modern classic 360, and you'll see why here in a second. But much cleaner label, all in all. And this is also where we started to see the Kinect. Microsoft made their acquisition of the Kinect group, and they started basically packaging it with all the Xbox 360s. You might remember that. And so you started seeing games that were better with Kinect sensor and lets you do, crazy dance moves and, act like a kind of an idiot in front of your TV screen, playing all sorts of crazy games. But that was the Kinect. And so these are the different brandings that you started to see. Again, you didn't see any of those in the previous versions. I haven't been able to spot any Kinect branding on this version. I've looked at a fairly large sample set. It seems pretty consistent that it started right here at the modern classic 360 labeling. So that's the variations that you'll see. Games that have this X360 Kinect are pretty much exclusively Kinect games. The better with Kinect are games that can be played without it, but have the Kinect support. So that's usually what that distinction means. Now, tell me if you can spot the difference. If I click it. Can you see the difference? I'll go back. I'll go forward. If you caught it, it's a fun little game there. The logo changed. That's it. This is the modern Xbox One logo. So this packaging, this variation of cover branding came out at the time the Xbox One was released. They updated their Xbox Globe logo. They updated their Xbox text, and they went from kind of a yellowish green with the, kind of the light orb in the middle, and again, that gray gradient, to the more flat and polished green icon, plus the more modern Xbox screen. And that's how you can tell the difference between one of the, again, the modern 360 and the modern One 360. So again, you have the classic and there's the One. Another interesting thing kind of to note is that these modern One 360 labels, almost all of them had this stuff in the back. I shouldn't have clicked. It's not a clicking thing. But it had this text printed on the back of it. So these were Xbox 360 games, but they were printed like an Xbox One game. So not all of them had the clear cases, but those that did have the clear cases, you could see the text through it. And this has the software license agreement, so some kind of SLA printed into it. So if you see one of these, 99% of the time you're going to have some kind of SLA text in the back, which is just good to know. The final version 5, they just dropped all pretense and just went straight up Xbox One. They didn't even try anymore. They're just like, all right, well, screw it. We're just going to jump in and we're going to be like, okay, we're now Xbox One. And these were released in tandem with the backwards compatibility for the Xbox One. So if you ever saw one of these are actually, I would think, fairly collectible now, or at least something that will probably be collectible over time. But these weren't super widely distributed, but they were actually released in a DVD style case. So they didn't get released in the Blu-ray style case of Xbox Ones, but actually in a DVD style case size. And they had both Xbox One and Xbox 360 because they were compatible with both. But it was actually an Xbox 360 disc straight up. So it's just an interesting little footnote, again, just to kind of talk about the various variations that this system had. I mean, there was just a whole bunch of them. So I appreciate you watching this and be curious to know which one you thought was maybe the more interesting. Which was your favorite label? Which one do you think really captured the essence of the Xbox 360 during the era? Which one do you remember most? Which one do you hate the most? I don't know. Let me know in your comments. But in the meantime, thanks for watching, and go play some games. Cheers.